Wine dripped down my $3,000 dress like blood from a fresh wound. Vanessa smirked as she set the empty glass on the table, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. Now you look as cheap as you really are. Her mother, Helen, beamed with pride from across the room. My son David suddenly found his phone fascinating. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. But let me back up and tell you how I ended up standing there humiliated in front of 30 people on my 64th birthday. It started 3 weeks earlier when David called with what he claimed was wonderful news. "Mom, we're throwing you a surprise party," he announced, though his voice lacked any real enthusiasm. Vanessa insisted. "She's been planning it for weeks." Vanessa insisted. That should have been my first red flag in 8 years of marriage to my son. My daughter-in-law had never insisted on anything that benefited me. But I was still naive enough to believe she might have grown a heart. The party was at their house. My house, actually, the one I'd signed over to them 3 years ago when Robert died to help with the mortgage, David had said. Just temporarily, until we get back on our feet. That temporary arrangement had become surprisingly permanent. I arrived fashionably late, wearing the navy silk dress I'd bought for the occasion. $3,000 seemed excessive, but Robert had left me comfortable, and I wanted to look elegant for what I thought would be a celebration of family. The first hour went smoothly enough. Neighbors, a few old friends, David's colleagues from the accounting firm where he worked as a junior partner. Everyone complimented my dress, the catering was decent, and I actually started to relax. That's when Vanessa made her move. She'd been watching me all evening with those calculating green eyes, waiting for the perfect moment. It came during David's toast when everyone's attention was focused on his rambling speech about family and gratitude. "Let me get you some more wine, Margaret," she said sweetly, approaching with a full glass of red wine, and that smile I'd learned to distrust. I should have seen it coming. The way she positioned herself, the angle of her approach, the theatrical stumble that sent the entire contents of the glass cascading down the front of my dress. "Oh my goodness, I'm so clumsy," she gasped loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm so sorry, Margaret." But her eyes weren't sorry. They were triumphant. That's when she delivered the line that changed everything. "Now you look as cheap as you really are." She said it quietly, meant only for me. But in the sudden silence that followed the wine incident, her words carried further than she'd intended. A few people definitely heard it. I watched their faces change from sympathy to shock to uncomfortable embarrassment. Helen Roberts, Vanessa's mother, actually started clapping slowly, as if approving of a well-executed performance. David looked up from his phone just long enough to mumble, "These things happen, Mom. It's just a dress. Just a dress." Standing there with wine soaking through the silk, feeling the stares of 30 people, I realized something crucial. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate act of cruelty performed in front of witnesses to maximize my humiliation. And my son's only response was to minimize it. I excused myself to the bathroom, ostensibly to clean up, but really to process what had just happened. In the mirror, I looked like exactly what Vanessa wanted me to look like. A foolish old woman who didn't know her place. But something else stared back at me from that mirror. Something I hadn't seen in years. Anger. Pure, clean, crystalline anger. When I returned to the party, Vanessa was holding court near the dessert table, regaling a group with an animated story about her latest shopping trip. She glanced at me as I approached, expecting to see defeat. Instead, she saw something that made her step back. "Thank you for the party," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the room. It was very illuminating. I gathered my purse, kissed David on the cheek, and walked out without another word. Behind me, I heard whispered conversations starting up, voices asking what had really happened, whether anyone else had heard what Vanessa said. Good, let them talk. Because as I drove home that night, still wearing my wine-stained dress, I was already planning my next move. Vanessa thought she'd won tonight, thought she'd put me in my place once and for all. She had no idea what she'd actually done. She'd awakened something in me that had been sleeping for far too long. And now that I was awake, I was going to remind everyone exactly who Margaret Thompson really was. Starting with a little investigation into my dear daughter-in-law's background. The wine stain came out, but the humiliation had set permanently. I spent the next morning researching dry cleaners like it was the most important task in the world. Anything to avoid thinking about what had really happened at that party. But by noon, I couldn't hide from the truth anymore. My son's wife had deliberately humiliated me, and he'd done nothing to stop it. I was still sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the ruined dress when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw David shifting nervously from foot to foot, holding a bouquet of grocery store flowers. "Hi, Mom," he said when I opened the door. "I brought you these, to apologize for last night." "For what exactly?" I asked, not moving aside to let him in. He looked confused. "The wine thing. Vanessa feels terrible about it." "Does she?" I kept my voice neutral. "That's interesting, considering what she said afterward." David's face went blank. "What did she say afterward?" So, he really hadn't heard it, or he was pretending he hadn't. With David, it was sometimes hard to tell the difference. "Come in," I said finally. "We need to talk." I made coffee while he sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with homework for 12 years, where we'd discussed his college plans, his career goals, his wedding plans, back when he still valued my opinion. "David," I said, setting down his mug. "How much money have you borrowed from me since your father died?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't know." "Why roughly? Give me a ballpark figure." He shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe 15,000, 20. It was all legitimate stuff, Mom. The transmission on Vanessa's car, the new roof, the kitchen renovation." $47,000, I said quietly. The number hung in the air between us. "That can't be right," he said. But his voice lacked conviction. I pulled out the folder I'd prepared that morning. Bank statements, copies of checks, wire transfer receipts, all laid out in chronological order with running totals. 47,326, I repeated. In 22 months, David stared at the papers, his face growing pale. "Some of that was gifts," he said weakly. "Christmas, birthdays. I've separated gifts from loans. This is just loans. Money you promised to pay back." I flipped to another section. "Care to guess how much you've actually repaid?" He didn't answer. "Nothing. $0 and zero." The silence stretched between us. Finally, David looked up from the papers. "Are you asking for it back?" Such a simple question. Such a loaded answer. "I'm asking why your wife thought it was appropriate to humiliate me in front of 30 people when I've been subsidizing your lifestyle for almost 2 years. She was embarrassed about the accident. Sometimes she says things she doesn't mean when she's flustered." I almost laughed. "David, she told me I looked as cheap as I really am." That wasn't an accident or embarrassment. That was malice. Vanessa wouldn't say something like that. There it was. The automatic defense. The refusal to see what was right in front of him. I'd raised him to respect women, to be a good husband. I just hadn't realized he'd extend that respect to everyone except his mother. "She did say it," I said calmly, "and Helen applauded her for it." "Helen wasn't even near you when the wine spilled." "No, but she was close enough to hear what Vanessa said, and instead of being horrified, she looked proud." David stood up, abandoning his coffee. "I think you misunderstood what happened. Vanessa is upset about the whole thing. She sent me here to apologize and to see if you wanted her to pay for dry cleaning." "How generous of her." "Mom, don't be like this." "Like what?" "Like someone who expects basic respect from her family?" He had no answer for that. After he left, I sat alone with my financial records spread across the table. $47,000, nearly a quarter of Robert's life insurance payout. Money I'd given freely because I thought it was helping my son build a stable life with the woman he loved. but looking at it now, I saw a different pattern. The requests had escalated over time. Small emergencies at first, then larger renovations, then luxury purchases disguised as necessities. The kitchen renovation alone had cost $18,000, featuring granite countertops and professional-grade appliances that Vanessa had picked out personally. My kitchen still had the original laminate counters from 1987. I pulled out my laptop and began typing. If Vanessa thought $47,000 bought her the right to humiliate me, she was about to learn how expensive that privilege really was. But first, I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with. Time to do some digging into the background of my darling daughter-in-law. What I found in that first hour of searching made me pour myself a very large glass of wine. Vanessa Bradley Thompson had quite the interesting past. Amazing what you could find online when you knew where to look and had a whole afternoon to kill. I started with the basics. Social media profiles, old newspaper articles, public records. By dinner time, I had a clearer picture of the woman who'd married my son, and it wasn't the sweet, struggling young professional she'd pretended to be. First discovery. Vanessa had been married before, twice, actually. Her first marriage lasted 18 months, ending when husband number 1 filed for divorce, citing financial impropriety. The court documents were sealed, but the local newspaper had covered the story because the husband was a minor public figure, a city council member in their small Tennessee town. Allegations of unauthorized credit card use and forged documents, the article read. No criminal charges were filed as part of the divorce settlement, but the councilman had declared bankruptcy 6 months later. Husband number 2 fared slightly better, lasting 2 years before Vanessa decided she needed space to grow as a person. That quote came from her own Facebook post, complete with inspirational sunset photos and hashtags about new beginnings. What she didn't post about was the restraining order he'd filed 3 months after their separation, or the fact that she'd maxed out 4 credit cards in his name during their marriage. By the time she met David, she'd perfected her act. Single professional woman, marketing coordinator for a small firm, just looking for someone stable and kind. She'd targeted him beautifully, I had to admit. A recent widower, financially comfortable, emotionally vulnerable, with a mother who would welcome any woman who made her son happy. I'd been so grateful when David started dating again after losing his first wife, Sarah, to cancer. So relieved when he seemed genuinely happy with Vanessa. So thrilled when he announced their engagement after just 6 months. Looking back, I should have wondered why someone as charming and attractive as Vanessa was still single at 32. Why she had so few close friends, why her family rarely visited, why she seemed so eager to become part of our tight little unit. Now I knew she wasn't joining our family. She was replacing it with herself. The doorbell interrupted my research. Through the window, I saw a silver Honda in my driveway. Vanessa's car. I considered not answering, but curiosity won. What could she possibly want? She stood on my porch wearing a perfectly contrite expression and carrying a pink bakery box. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she dressed down in jeans and a simple sweater. The picture of casual sincerity. "Margaret, I'm so glad you're home," she said, offering the box. "I brought your favorite cookies from that bakery downtown. The chocolate chip ones. They weren't my favorites. I'd mentioned once that I liked them, probably 2 years ago, but she'd remembered, which was more attention than David usually paid to my preferences. "Thank you," I said, accepting the box but not inviting her in. "I wanted to apologize properly for last night," she continued. "I was mortified by the accident and I'm afraid I said some thoughtless things in my embarrassment. David told me you were upset and I just felt terrible about it. Thoughtless things, not malicious things." "Thoughtless. What exactly do you remember saying?" I asked. Her eyes flickered slightly. "Honestly, I was so flustered. I can barely remember. Something about the dress, maybe." "I know. I felt awful seeing you all stained like that." "Interesting." She was going to pretend she didn't remember the exact words, which meant she knew exactly how bad they'd sounded. I remember quite clearly, I said mildly. You said I looked as cheap as I really am. Her face crumpled with what looked like genuine distress. Oh, Margaret, no. I would never say something so cruel. You must have misheard me in all the confusion. Did I misheard your mother clapping? That stopped her cold. For just a moment, the mask slipped and I saw calculation in her green eyes. Mom gets excited at parties, she said finally. She probably didn't even realize what was happening. I shifted the bakery box to my other hand. Well, thank you for the cookies and the apology. Actually, she said quickly. I was hoping we could chat for a few minutes, clear the air properly. I'd hate for one awkward moment to damage our relationship. Our relationship as if we'd ever had one that wasn't built on my usefulness to her marriage. I'm pretty tired today, I said. Maybe another time. Of course, she stepped back, still smiling. I just want you to know how much David and I appreciate everything you do for us. You're such a generous mother-in-law. Not everyone is so blessed. There it was. The reminder of my financial contributions dressed up as gratitude. The subtle message that my place in their lives depended on my continued generosity. After she left, I opened the bakery box. Inside were a dozen expensive-looking cookies and a handwritten note for the sweetest mother-in-law in the world. Thank you for everything. Love, Vanessa. I had to give her credit for thoroughness. But as I threw the note away, I was already planning my next move. If Vanessa wanted to play games about memory and misunderstandings, I was happy to oblige. Tomorrow, I was going to have a conversation with Helen Roberts. Time to find out exactly what kind of apple had produced this particular tree. Helen Roberts lived in a pristine subdivision where every lawn was edged to perfection and every mailbox matched the house trim. The kind of neighborhood that screamed upper-middle-class respectability while hiding all sorts of interesting secrets behind closed doors. Her house was a colonial revival with white columns and black shutters. Exactly the sort of place you'd expect to find the mother of someone like Vanessa. Everything about it whispered good family values and proper upbringing. I'd called ahead, claiming I wanted to discuss plans for David and Vanessa's upcoming anniversary. Helen had been delighted to invite me over for afternoon tea. How lovely that you're taking such an interest in celebrating their marriage, she'd gushed. If only she knew what kind of celebration I had in mind. Helen met me at the door wearing a floral dress and pearls, looking like she'd stepped out of a 1950s magazine. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her makeup expertly applied. She had the same bone structure as Vanessa, the same calculating intelligence behind the warm smile. Margaret, how wonderful to see you, she said, air-kissing my cheeks. Come in, come in. I've made cucumber sandwiches and scones. The living room was decorated in shades of cream and gold with oil paintings of flowers and landscapes covering the walls. Everything was expensive but tasteful. The home of someone who understood quality but not necessarily authenticity. I was so sorry to hear about the little accident at your party, Helen said as she poured tea from a delicate china service. Vanessa was quite upset about it. Was she? I accepted the cup, noting it was bone china. Expensive bone china. She seemed to handle it well at the time. Oh, you know how she is. Always trying to make the best of awkward situations. She gets that from me, I'm afraid. We Roberts women believe in keeping a smile on our faces no matter what. The Roberts women. Interesting phrasing. She is certainly good at maintaining composure. I agreed, even when saying things she might later regret. Helen's hand paused slightly as she reached for a cucumber sandwich. I beg your pardon at the party after the wine spilled. I thought I heard her make a comment about my appearance, but perhaps I misunderstood. Oh, I'm sure you did. Vanessa would never say anything unkind. She thinks the world of you. The lie came so easily, I almost admired it. This was where Vanessa had learned her craft. I'm sure you're right, I said, sipping my tea. It's just that a few other guests mentioned hearing something and I wanted to clear up any misunderstanding. Helen's smile became more fixed. Well, people do love to gossip, don't they? Especially when they've had a bit too much to drink. True, though. I noticed you seemed quite pleased with something during the incident. You were actually applauding. This time her hand did stop, suspended halfway to her mouth with a tiny sandwich. I was applauding David's speech, of course. Such a lovely tribute to you. Was that before or after the wine spilled? I am not sure I remember the exact sequence of events. It all happened so quickly. Liar, but a skilled one. I could see where Vanessa had learned to deflect and redirect. Helen, I said, setting down my cup with deliberate care. How well do you know your daughter's first two husbands? The color drained from her face so quickly, I thought she might faint. Her what? First two husbands. James Bradley from Tennessee and Marcus Chen from Ohio. Surely she mentioned them. Helen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I think there's been some misunderstanding. Has there? Because the public records are quite clear. 2 previous marriages. Both ending rather badly. Financial irregularities in both cases. I found it fascinating reading. I don't know what you think you've discovered, Helen said, her voice shaky now. But Vanessa's past relationships are none of your business. You're absolutely right. They wouldn't be my business at all. Except for the fact that she's now married to my son and has borrowed nearly $50,000 from me in the past 2 years. Helen went completely still. 47,326 to be precise for various emergencies and home improvements. None of which David mentioned to you. I'm guessing they said they were financially stable. They are because I've been subsidizing them. I pulled out a folder from my purse. Would you like to see the receipts? Helen stared at the folder like it contained a venomous snake. What do you want, Margaret? Finally. The mask was off and we could have an honest conversation. I want to understand exactly who my daughter-in-law really is, and I want to understand what role you played in creating her. Vanessa is a loving wife who's made some mistakes in her past. She's learned from them. Has she? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like she's simply gotten better at choosing her targets. Helen stood up abruptly, her composure finally cracking completely. I think you should leave. Of course. I gathered my purse and folded her. Thank you for the tea. It was very enlightening. As I reached the door, Helen called after me. Margaret, whatever you think you know about Vanessa, she makes David happy. Isn't that what matters? I turned back to look at her. She was standing in her perfect living room, surrounded by her perfect things, looking suddenly old and fragile. Helen, I said gently, I raised David to be happy, but I also raised him to be honest, decent, and respectful. Your daughter is systematically destroying all 3 of those qualities. So, no, his happiness isn't all that matters anymore. I left her standing there, probably already reaching for her phone to call Vanessa. Good. Let them scramble to figure out their next move because I was just getting started. The call came at 6 a.m. sharp. David's voice was tight with anger, which meant Vanessa had gotten to him first with whatever story she and Helen had cooked up after my visit yesterday. Mom, we need to talk right now. I was already awake, sitting on my back porch with coffee in my laptop, doing more research into the fascinating Bradley family history. Amazing what you could find in old newspaper archives when you had time and motivation. Good morning to you, too, sweetheart. Don't you dare act innocent. What the hell did you say to Helen yesterday? Such language from my well-raised boy. Vanessa was really bringing out the best in him. I had tea with your mother-in-law and we discussed family. Why? You know exactly why. She called Vanessa crying, saying you'd ambushed her with lies about Vanessa's past relationships. Made her feel attacked in her own home. Did I lie about anything? David, silence on his end. Long enough that I knew Helen had confirmed at least some of what I'd said. You had no right to dig into Vanessa's private life. I had every right to understand who I've been financially supporting for 2 years. That money was given freely. It was loaned freely with the understanding that it would be repaid. But that's not really the issue anymore, is it? I heard him take a shaky breath. What's the issue then, Mom? The issue is that your wife deliberately humiliated me at my own birthday party, then lied about it, then sent you to gaslight me about what happened. And when that didn't work, she baked me cookies and pretended to apologize while continuing to lie about what she said. She didn't lie. She was embarrassed and said something stupid in the heat of the moment. David, she told me I looked as cheap as I really am. Those were her exact words, spoken deliberately and with malice. Her mother heard it and applauded. There was nothing accidental or heat of the moment about it. Another silence. Longer this time. Even if that's true, he said finally. Going after her family was over the line. I didn't go after anyone. I had a polite conversation with Helen about her daughter's history of marrying men and then bankrupting them. Would you like to hear about James Bradley's experience? Mom, stop. He was a city council member in Chattanooga, married Vanessa in 2018 after a whirlwind 6-month courtship. Sound familiar? By the time she left him 18 months later, he'd lost his house, his car, and his position on the council. She'd run up $60,000 in debt in his name. You're lying. Marcus Chen lasted longer, 2 years of marriage before she decided she needed space to grow. He declared bankruptcy 6 months after their divorce. She'd somehow gotten access to his business accounts and nearly destroyed his restaurant. Stop it. Both men filed restraining orders. David. Both men tried to press charges for fraud, but couldn't make them stick because she was technically their legal wife when she spent their money. I heard something crash on his end. He'd thrown something. Probably his coffee mug against the wall. My calm, controlled son was having a tantrum. Why are you doing this to us? I'm not doing anything to you. I'm trying to save you from making the same mistakes as husbands 1 and 2. Vanessa loves me. Vanessa loves your bank account and mine just like she loved James' political connections and Marcus' restaurant income. You're useful to her right now, but usefulness has an expiration date. You're wrong. You're bitter and jealous and wrong. That stung, but I'd expected it. David, has Vanessa ever contributed to your joint finances? Real contribution, not just token amounts. She works part-time. Her marketing consulting brings in decent money. How much? I don't know the exact amount. Ballpark. Maybe $20,000 a year. I'd found her tax returns online. Last year, she'd reported $11,000 in consulting income. This year so far, it was less than $4,000. And how much of that has gone into your joint savings versus her personal spending? No answer. David, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want an honest answer. If I stopped giving you money tomorrow, could you and Vanessa maintain your current lifestyle? The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. We'd manage, he said finally. Would you? Or would you lose the house I gave you? The cars I helped you buy, the credit rating I helped you maintain. That house is ours now. You signed it over. Yes, I did. Because you told me it was temporary help while you got back on your feet after Sarah's death. That was 3 years ago. David, when exactly were you planning to get back on your feet? We've been dealing with a lot of expenses, such as the kitchen renovation was necessary. The old cabinets were falling apart. Those cabinets were 10 years old and in perfect condition. Vanessa wanted granite countertops and stainless steel appliances to match the photos in her design magazines. You don't understand what it's like to be married to someone with standards. Standards? As if wanting nice things was the same as having principles. David, I said quietly, I want you to do something for me. I want you to add up everything you and Vanessa have spent in the past 2 years on things that weren't absolute necessities. The kitchen renovation, the new furniture, her clothes shopping, the vacations, the restaurant meals, all of it. Why? Because I think you'll discover that you've been living beyond your means for a long time. And the only reason you haven't noticed is because I've been covering the difference. And what if that's true? If that's true, then you need to decide whether you want to be a man who builds his own life or a man who lets his wife spend his mother's money. I hung up before he could respond. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with text messages from both David and Vanessa. Angry messages, pleading messages, accusatory messages. I deleted them all without reading past the first few words. If they wanted to have a conversation about the future, they could start by acknowledging the truth about the past. But something told me they weren't ready for that kind of honesty yet. 3 days of silence from David and Vanessa. 3 days of me going about my normal routine while knowing they were probably plotting their next move. I used the quiet time productively, meeting with my financial advisor to restructure my accounts and consulting with a lawyer about protective measures. Amazing how much clearer your thinking became when you stopped pretending everything was fine. On Thursday afternoon, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw both David and Vanessa standing on my porch, their faces wearing matching expressions of determined reasonness. They'd come together this time, presenting a united front. I almost smiled. They really thought they could outmaneuver me. "Hi, Mom," David said when I opened the door. "We were hoping we could talk." "All three of us," Vanessa added, her voice warm and conciliatory. "I think there's been a lot of miscommunication lately." They dressed carefully for this visit. David in his best suit, the one he wore to important client meetings. Vanessa in a conservative navy dress with minimal jewelry, playing the role of the respectful daughter-in-law. They'd even brought flowers, a tasteful bouquet of white roses. "Come in," I said, accepting the flowers with appropriate graciousness. They settled on my living room couch while I arranged the roses in a vase. I could feel them watching me, probably rehearsing their carefully planned arguments. "Mom," David began, "I want to apologize for losing my temper on the phone the other day. That wasn't fair to you. And I want to apologize for any hurt feelings from the party incident," Vanessa added. "I've been thinking about what you said you heard, and I realized my words must have sounded different than I intended. What I said, I heard, not what I actually heard," still maintaining plausible deniability. "I appreciate that," I said, settling into my armchair across from them. "The thing is," David continued, "we've been doing a lot of talking this week about our finances, about the help you've given us, about how to move forward, and we want you to know how grateful we are," Vanessa jumped in. "Not just for the money, but for your patience and understanding while we've worked to establish ourselves." I waited. There was clearly more coming. "We know $47,000 is a significant amount," David said carefully. "And we want to make things right." Now we were getting to the real purpose of their visit. "We have a proposal," Vanessa said, reaching into her purse and pulling out a folder. "A formal repayment plan. We've worked out a schedule that will have everything paid back within 3 years." She handed me the folder with a proud smile. Inside was a typed document, professionally formatted, laying out monthly payment amounts and dates. It looked official and responsible and completely meaningless. $200 a month, I read aloud, for 36 months. "It's what we can realistically afford while still maintaining our current obligations," David explained. "Your current obligations?" I set the document aside, such as the mortgage on the house, obviously the car payments, insurance, living expenses. "Living expenses," I repeated. Would that include Vanessa's monthly spa appointments, her shopping trips to the outlet mall, the weekly date nights at expensive restaurants? They exchanged glances. "We're not asking you to subsidize our lifestyle anymore," Vanessa said carefully. "We're offering to pay back what we owe at $200 a month with no interest. You're offering to take 36 years to repay money you spent in 24 months. 3 years, David corrected. 36 months is 3 years. My mistake. 3 years to pay back money you borrowed for emergency home repairs and then spent on luxury renovations." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Mom," David said slowly. "What exactly are you saying?" I'm saying that your repayment plan is insulting. I'm saying that $200 a month doesn't even cover the interest on what you owe me. And I'm saying that this entire performance feels less like genuine remorse and more like a negotiating tactic. Vanessa leaned forward, her mask of reasonness starting to slip. Margaret, we're trying to do the right thing here. We could have just ignored the debt entirely. Claimed it was all gifts, but we didn't. How generous of you. What do you want from us? David asked, frustration creeping into his voice. What did I want? I'd been asking myself that question for days, and I finally had an answer. I want honesty, I said simply. Real honesty, not carefully crafted apologies and payment plans designed to make you look reasonable while changing nothing. We're being honest, Vanessa protested. Are you, David? Did you tell Vanessa about my conversation with her mother? His face went pale. Clearly, he hadn't. What conversation? Vanessa asked, but her voice had gone sharp. The one where Helen confirmed your previous marriages. The ones you never mentioned to any of us. Vanessa went completely still. That's ancient history. Is it? Because the pattern seems remarkably consistent. Find a man with resources, marry him quickly, drain his accounts, then move on when the money runs out. That's not what happened with us. David said, but he sounded less certain than before. Isn't it? You've been married 3 years, and in that time, Vanessa has contributed virtually nothing to your household income while spending nearly $50,000 of my money on non-essential purchases. She works, David protested. Part-time consulting that brings in maybe $4,000 a year, according to her tax returns. You looked at her tax returns. David's voice was outraged. They're public record if you know where to look. Amazing what becomes available when someone claims business income. Vanessa stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't. I agreed. But you might want to because I haven't finished sharing what I learned about your employment history. She froze halfway to the door. Sit down, Vanessa, both of you, because we're going to have that honest conversation now, whether you want to or not. They sat. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I had their complete undivided attention. Vanessa has never held a steady job for more than 18 months, I said, pulling out another folder from my carefully organized research. In the past decade, she's worked for 7 different companies in 4 different states. David's face was growing paler by the minute. People change jobs. That's normal in marketing. Is it normal to be fired for falsifying expense reports? Because that's what happened at Morrison and Associates in Tennessee. Vanessa's composure finally cracked completely. You have no right to contact my former employers. I didn't need to contact anyone. Wrongful termination lawsuits are public record, especially when they involve allegations of fraud. I opened the folder and spread the documents across my coffee table like a dealer laying out cards. Morrison and Associates fired for submitting fake receipts. Bradley Marketing Solutions in Ohio terminated for unauthorized use of company credit cards. Thompson Creative in Michigan let go during a restructuring that happened to coincide with missing petty cash. Those are all lies, Vanessa said. But her voice was shaking now. Are they? Because I also found your LinkedIn profile where you list yourself as having mutually agreed to part ways with each of these companies. Funny how your version never mentions the theft allegations. David was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Vanessa, please tell me she's making this up. Vanessa turned to him with tears in her eyes, playing her final card. David, you know who I am. You know I would never do anything dishonest. Your mother is trying to destroy our marriage because she can't stand that you chose me over her. It was a masterful deflection. I had to admit. Turn the focus away from her crimes and onto my supposed jealousy. I chose you over her, David repeated slowly. Vanessa, my mother has given us almost $50,000. How exactly did I choose you over her? She's controlling David. Can't you see that? She uses money to manipulate us, to keep us dependent on her so she can feel important. If I wanted to control you, I said calmly, I would have made the loans contingent on conditions. I would have demanded monthly financial reports or veto power over your purchases or regular family dinners. Instead, I wrote checks whenever you asked and never questioned what the money was for. Because you wanted us to owe you, Vanessa shot back. You wanted us to feel guilty and grateful so we'd never be able to cut you out of our lives. David stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair. Stop, both of you. Just stop. He walked to the window, staring out at my garden, while Vanessa and I watched him in silence. When he finally turned back, his face looked older somehow, etched with a weariness I'd never seen before. Mom, he said quietly. Is everything in these folders true? Yes, all of it. The previous marriages, the job terminations, the fraud allegations. Yes, he turned to his wife. Vanessa, I need you to look me in the eye and tell me the truth. Did you steal from your previous employers? David, please don't do this. Did you steal from them? She started crying in earnest now. The kind of desperate tears that come when all other options are exhausted. It wasn't stealing. They were expense reimbursements I was entitled to. The companies were just being petty about documentation. Falsified receipts aren't documentation problems, I said gently. They're fraud. And your previous husbands, David continued, his voice getting steadier. Did you max out credit cards in their names? We were married. Their money was my money. That's not how marriage works, Vanessa. She looked back and forth between us, finally realizing that her charm and manipulation weren't going to save her this time. The mask came off completely, revealing the calculating predator underneath. Fine, she snapped. Yes, I took money from men who could afford it. Yes, I've made some questionable financial decisions. But so what? You benefited too, David. You enjoyed the nice house, the expensive dinners, the luxury lifestyle. You never asked where the money came from because you didn't want to know. The honesty was brutal and absolutely devastating. I thought it came from my mother, David said quietly. It did come from your mother. I just helped you spend it on things that would make us happy instead of letting her hoard it like some paranoid dragon. That was the moment I knew I'd won. Not because I'd exposed her crimes, but because she'd finally shown David exactly who she really was. He sat back down heavily, his head in his hands. Jesus, Vanessa, what have you done to us? I've given you the best 3 years of your life. You've spent $50,000 of my mother's money and made me complicit in stealing from her. It wasn't stealing. She gave it willingly because you lied about what it was for. They were screaming at each other now. All pretense of civility abandoned. I sat quietly in my chair, watching 38 years of careful parenting finally pay off. David was angry, hurt, and confused. But underneath it all, he was still the decent man I'd raised him to be. When the shouting stopped, the silence felt deafening. Finally, David looked up at me. Mom, what happens now? What happens now? The question I'd been waiting for him to ask. Now, I said, you decide what kind of man you want to be. The divorce papers were filed 6 weeks later. I didn't gloat when David called to tell me, though I'll admit to feeling a profound sense of relief. My son was finally free, though it would take months for him to fully understand the extent of the damage Vanessa had done to his life. She didn't go quietly, of course. The week after David asked her to leave, I found my tires slashed and my garden trampled. No proof it was her, but the timing was suspicious. Then came the threatening phone calls from blocked numbers, always at 3 o'clock in the morning, always hanging up when I answered. I installed security cameras and changed my locks. At my age, I shouldn't have needed to worry about an angry exoter-in-law seeking revenge. But Vanessa had always been unpredictable when cornered. The real surprise came when David moved back in with me temporarily. Just until I figure out what I want to do with the house, he said. But I could see he needed more than just a place to stay. He needed to remember who he used to be before Vanessa got her claws into him. Living with my adult son again was strange at first. He was quiet, almost withdrawn, spending hours going through financial records and trying to untangle the mess Vanessa had made of their joint accounts. She'd cleaned out their savings the day he asked for the divorce, transferring everything to accounts he couldn't access. "I feel like such an idiot," he said one evening over dinner. "How did I not see what she was doing?" "Because you're a decent person who trusted the woman you married," I replied. "Decent people have trouble recognizing predators because we don't think like they do." But the signs were all there. The spending, the lies about her work history, the way she treated you. He pushed food around his plate without eating. "God, Mom, the way she treated you. I let her humiliate you at your own birthday party." "Yes, you did." He looked up, startled by my bluntness. "You let her treat me badly for 3 years," I continued. "You prioritized her feelings over mine, her wants over my needs, her version of events over my actual experiences. And when I finally fought back, your first instinct was to defend her." "I know. I'm sorry." "Sorry isn't enough, David. Sorry is what you say when you accidentally hurt someone. What you did was systematic. You systematically chose your wife over your mother for 3 years, even when she was obviously in the wrong." He set down his fork, tears in his eyes. "How do I fix that?" "You can't fix it. You can only learn from it and do better going forward." We sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Patterson next door calling her cat in for the night. The same routine she'd followed for 20 years. Some things never changed, but others changed whether you wanted them to or not. "Mom," David said finally about the money, the $47,000. "I want to pay it back. All of it with interest." "With what?" "Vanessa cleaned out your accounts, remember? I'll get a second job, sell the house, whatever it takes." I studied my son's face, seeing determination there for the first time in years. "David, I don't need the money back. Your father left me very comfortable, but I need to pay it back for my own self-respect." That I understood. "All right, but we'll work out reasonable terms. I won't have you destroying your financial future to fix your past mistakes." He nodded gratefully, and I saw a glimpse of the young man I'd raised, the one with integrity and backbone who'd somehow gotten lost along the way. The phone rang, interrupting our conversation. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, I immediately recognized the voice. "Margaret, this is Helen Roberts, Vanessa's mother." I put the phone on speaker so David could hear. "Hello, Helen. I wanted to call and apologize for everything that's happened. I had no idea about Vanessa's past when she married David." Liar. Helen had known exactly who her daughter was, but I wasn't interested in relitigating that point. "I also wanted to warn you," Helen continued. "Vanessa is upset about the divorce. She's talking about fighting it, claiming David owes her alimony, that sort of thing." "On what grounds?" "She says she gave up her career to be a housewife, that she's entitled to compensation for her sacrifices." David snorted. "What career?" "She worked part-time at best. She's also saying she has evidence that you interfered in their marriage, Margaret. That you turned David against her with lies and manipulation." "Did she mention which of my statements were lies?" Silence on Helen's end. "Helen, is there a point to this call?" "She wants to meet with you, both of you, to work out some kind of settlement." David and I looked at each other. He shook his head firmly. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. "She's not going to give up easily. Vanessa never gives up when money is involved. Then she can explain that to her lawyer and to mine." After I hung up, David looked troubled. "Do you think she'll really try to fight the divorce?" "She can try, but she won't get far. Your marriage lasted 3 years. She has no children and she's already demonstrated financial irresponsibility. Plus, I have documentation of all the money she took from me under false pretenses." But even as I reassured him, I had a feeling this wasn't over. Vanessa had shown herself to be vindictive and desperate, a dangerous combination in someone with nothing left to lose. I just didn't realize how dangerous she could become. The fire started at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because that's when my smoke detector went off, screaming like a banshee and jolting me from deep sleep. By the time I stumbled out of bed and saw the orange glow outside my bedroom window, flames were already climbing up the side of my house. David's room was at the far end of the hall. I pounded on his door while dialing 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hit the numbers. Fire department, what's your emergency? My house is on fire. 1247 Maple Street. Ma'am, are you and anyone else in the house safe? David appeared beside me, wearing boxers and a t-shirt, his hair sticking up in all directions. Mom, we need to get out now. We ran through the house, grabbing nothing but our phones and car keys. Outside, we stood on the sidewalk in our pajamas, watching orange flames dance across the roof of the home I'd lived in for 32 years. The fire department arrived within minutes, but by then the entire east side of the house was engulfed. They managed to save the main structure, but the damage was extensive. My bedroom, the guest room where David had been staying. Most of the upstairs hall gone. Any idea how it started? The fire chief asked after his crew had the blaze under control. None, I said, though I was already forming suspicions. We'll investigate, but I can tell you it started outside near the back porch. Looks like someone doused the exterior wall with accelerant. David and I exchanged looks. Someone had deliberately set my house on fire. The next few hours were a blur of insurance calls, police reports, and temporary housing arrangements. David insisted I stay at a hotel while the investigation continued, and I was too shaken to argue. By noon, we were sitting in a generic hotel room drinking bad coffee and trying to process what had happened. It was her, wasn't it? David said finally. We can't know that for sure. Mom, who else would do something like this? The timing is too coincidental. I had to agree. 2 weeks after Helen's warning about Vanessa not giving up easily, my house mysteriously catches fire. The police were already treating it as arson, and Vanessa had motive, means, and opportunity. But proving it would be another matter entirely. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Detective Williams, the officer who'd taken our statement at the scene. Mrs. Thompson, we've made an arrest in connection with your house fire. My heart stopped. Vanessa? No, ma'am. A man named Tony Martinez. He's a small-time criminal with a record for arson for hire. We caught him on a traffic camera near your neighborhood around midnight. Did he say who hired him? He's not talking yet, but we're working on it. In the meantime, I'd recommend staying somewhere safe. If someone hired him to burn down your house, they might try again. After the detective hung up, David and I sat in stunned silence. Tony Martinez, I said finally. I've never heard that name before, but Vanessa might have. She knows all kinds of unsavory people from her various jobs and relationships. I thought about the woman who'd married my son, who'd smiled at family dinners while planning to steal our money, who'd deliberately humiliated me at my own birthday party. Was she really capable of hiring someone to burn down my house? Looking back, I should have realized the answer was obviously yes. The hotel phone rang, startling us both. David answered it wearily. Thompson Thompson hotel room. His face went white as he listened to whoever was on the other end. No, absolutely not. Don't call here again. He hung up and looked at me with something approaching panic in his eyes. That was Vanessa. She knows we're staying here. How could she possibly know that? I don't know, but she does. She said she wanted to meet to talk about our mutual problem. What mutual problem? I think she's claiming we framed her for the arson. The audacity of it took my breath away. She burns down my house, then calls to suggest we're framing her for a crime she actually committed. David, we're leaving now. Where are we going? Somewhere she can't find us. Pack your things. As we threw our belongings into suitcases, my phone started ringing. Unknown number. I didn't answer, but it immediately started ringing again. Different number this time. On the third call, I answered. Margaret Thompson, you interfering. Old Vanessa's voice was slurred like she'd been drinking. Or maybe she was just letting her mask slip completely now that she had nothing left to lose. If you're recording this conversation, Vanessa, you should know the police are already investigating the fire. Good luck proving I had anything to do with it. Tony Martinez might have something to say about that silence on her end long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. You destroyed my life, she said finally. You destroyed your own life. I just documented it. I loved David. I gave him everything. You gave him nothing but lies and debt. He was happy with me. He was miserable with you. He just didn't realize it until I showed him the truth. She started crying then. Harsh sobs that sounded more like rage than grief. I won't let you win, she whispered. I won't let you take everything from me. The line went dead. David was staring at me with wide eyes. Mom, we need to call the police. We will. But first, we need to disappear for a while because I had a terrible feeling that Vanessa's next move would be far more dangerous than arson. We drove for 6 hours that night, finally stopping at a small motel outside Asheville, where David paid cash and registered under his middle name. I'd never been a fugitive before, but I was learning that running from a vindictive ex-daughter-in-law required skills I'd never developed. The motel room was clean but sparse with 2 double beds and a view of the parking lot. David immediately started making calls to his office, to the insurance company, to Detective Williams about Vanessa's threatening phone call. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands and trying to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. My house was half destroyed. A man I'd never met had been arrested for trying to burn it down. My former daughter-in-law was making increasingly erratic threats, and I felt strangely calm about all of it. Mom. David hung up his phone and looked at me with concern. Are you okay? You seem awfully quiet. I'm fine. Just thinking about what? About how liberating it was to finally stop pretending everything was normal. About how much energy I'd wasted over the years trying to keep peace with people who didn't deserve my courtesy. About how good it felt to fight back against someone who'd underestimated me. I'm thinking that Vanessa made a strategic error, I said finally. What do you mean? She escalated this to a criminal level. As long as it was just family drama, the humiliation, the financial manipulation, even the theft, it could be handled privately. But arson changes everything. Now the police are involved. Insurance companies are paying attention. And there's a paper trail that can't be dismissed or explained away. David sat down across from me. So, what happens now? Now, we let the system work. Tony Martinez will eventually tell the police who hired him, especially if they offer him a deal. Vanessa's phone call tonight was recorded by the hotel, so there's evidence of her making threats. And I still have all those financial records showing her pattern of behavior. You sound almost happy about it. I considered that. Was I happy? I'm relieved, I said finally. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm not the only one who sees Vanessa clearly. The police see it. The insurance investigators see it. Even you see it now. I'm not crazy or vindictive or jealous. I was right about her all along. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was short and chilling. This isn't over. David read it over my shoulder. That's enough. I'm calling Detective Williams. While he made the call, I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. A few cars, nothing suspicious, but I had the uneasy feeling we were being watched. Detective Williams wants us to come in tomorrow to make formal statements, David reported. He says Tony Martinez is starting to cooperate. What did he tell them? A woman approached him at a bar last week. Offered him $5,000 to torch your house. She showed him photos of the property, gave him specific instructions about where to set the fire for maximum damage. Did he identify her? Not yet, but they're putting together a photo lineup. If it's Vanessa, we'll know soon. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt sad. Sad for the woman who'd been so consumed by greed and anger that she'd destroyed her own life. Sad for my son who'd have to live with the knowledge that he'd married someone capable of attempted murder. Sad for myself because even winning this battle couldn't undo the years of manipulation and abuse. David, I said quietly, I need you to understand something. Even when this is over, even when Vanessa is in jail or out of our lives permanently, there are things that can't be fixed. Like what? Like the fact that for 3 years you chose her over me every single time there was a conflict. Like the fact that you let her steal from me and humiliate me because it was easier than confronting her. Like the fact that I can't trust you the way I used to. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. Mom, I know I messed up, but I thought we were working through this. We are, but working through something isn't the same as pretending it never happened. You're my son, and I love you, but you're not the same man I raised. Vanessa changed you, and I need to know that the person you become going forward is someone I can respect. How do I prove that to you? By never again choosing easy over right. By standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. By recognizing manipulation when you see it and refusing to be complicit in it. And if I do those things, then maybe eventually we can build something better than what we had before. My phone rang again. This time it was Detective Williams. Mrs. Thompson, we need you and your son to come in immediately. Tony Martinez just identified your daughter-in-law as the woman who hired him. We're issuing a warrant for her arrest. I felt a strange mix of vindication and exhaustion. It was over. Vanessa had finally pushed too far and now she would face the consequences. But as we packed our things to return to town, I couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa had one more card to play. And knowing her, it would be the most dangerous one yet. The courthouse steps were crawling with reporters when Vanessa's trial began 6 months later. Apparently, the story of a daughter-in-law who tried to burn down her ex-mother-in-law's house had captured the public imagination. I walked through the crowd with my head held high, David's hand steady on my elbow. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Vanessa sat at the defendant's table wearing a conservative suit and an expression of wounded innocence that I recognized all too well. She'd lost weight since the arrest, and her lawyer had styled her hair to make her look younger, more vulnerable. But when she turned to glance at David and me, her eyes held pure hatred. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Tony Martinez testified that Vanessa had approached him at Murphy's bar on March 15, offering him $5,000 to teach an old woman a lesson. She'd shown him photos of my house, pointed out the best access routes, and specified that she wanted the fire to look accidental, but cause significant damage. She was real specific about not wanting anyone to get hurt. Martinez said she just wanted to scare them, make them understand they couldn't mess with her family. Vanessa's lawyer tried to paint Martinez as an unreliable witness, a career criminal who'd say anything to reduce his own sentence. But the prosecution had other evidence. Bank records showing Vanessa had withdrawn $5,000 in cash the day before she approached Martinez. Security camera footage from the bar showing them together. Cell phone records proving she'd been in my neighborhood the night of the fire. The most damning evidence came from Vanessa herself. They played the recording of her threatening phone call to the hotel, her voice thick with rage as she promised that she wouldn't let me win. When Vanessa took the stand in her own defense, she was masterful, tears flowing freely, voice breaking with emotion. She painted herself as a victim of my manipulation and David's abandonment. Margaret Thompson destroyed my marriage. She testified. She couldn't stand that David loved me more than her. So, she dug into my past, twisted my mistakes into something sinister, and turned my husband against me. I was desperate, heartbroken, not thinking clearly. Her lawyer guided her through a narrative where every action was justified. Every crime was a misunderstanding. Every lie was self-defense against my alleged persecution. I never told Mr. Martinez to burn down anyone's house, she insisted. I may have vented my frustrations to a stranger in a bar, talked about wishing Margaret would understand how much she'd hurt me, but I never asked anyone to commit arson. It was a compelling performance. If I hadn't lived through her manipulation personally, I might have believed it myself. But the jury had heard all the evidence, seen all the documentation of her pattern of behavior. When they returned after 2 days of deliberation, their verdict was swift and unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Arson in the first degree, conspiracy to commit arson, making terroristic threats, and criminal harassment. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in prison with possibility of parole in 8. As the bailiff led Vanessa away in handcuffs, she turned back to look at David and me one final time. The mask was completely gone now, replaced by raw fury and something that might have been genuine surprise. She'd really believed she could manipulate her way out of this, could charm the jury into seeing her as the victim. She'd finally met a situation where her looks and lies couldn't save her. Outside the courthouse, reporters thrust microphones in my face, shouting questions about how it felt to see my daughter-in-law convicted, whether I felt safe now, what message this sent to other families dealing with financial abuse. I feel relieved, I said simply. Justice was served. But that wasn't the whole truth. Justice had been served. But the real victory wasn't Vanessa's conviction. It was the fact that my son was standing beside me, finally understanding what I'd been trying to protect him from all along. 6 months later, David and I stood in the rebuilt section of my house, admiring the new bedroom and updated electrical work that insurance had paid for. The space was brighter than before, more modern, though it would take time before it felt truly like home again. I never thanked you properly, David said as we surveyed the work. For what? For saving me from her? For refusing to give up even when I fought you every step of the way. I looked at my son, seeing someone I barely recognized, but was beginning to respect again. The past year had aged him, but it had also strengthened him. He'd paid back every penny of the money Vanessa had taken, selling the house they'd shared and moving into a modest apartment. He'd started therapy to understand how he'd been manipulated. Most importantly, he'd learned to trust his own judgment again instead of deferring to whoever spoke loudest. You saved yourself, I told him. I just gave you the information you needed to make better choices. Still, I'm sorry it took me so long to listen. Sometimes we have to lose everything to understand what we actually value. My phone buzzed with a text from Helen Roberts, Vanessa's mother. Over the past year, she'd reached out periodically offering apologies and explanations that I largely ignored. This message was different. Vanessa asked me to tell you she's sorry for everything. She knows she was wrong. I showed the text to David, who shook his head. Even now, she's trying to manipulate people through her mother. Probably, but you know what? It doesn't matter anymore. And it didn't. Vanessa was in prison. David had learned his lesson. And I was living my life on my own terms for the first time in years. I discovered that standing up for yourself, even when it was difficult and painful, was infinitely better than accepting mistreatment for the sake of keeping peace. My house was rebuilt. My relationship with my son was stronger than before. And I'd learned something valuable about my own strength. Sometimes the wine stain ruins the dress, but it also reveals who people really are underneath their masks. And sometimes that revelation, painful as it might be, is exactly what everyone needed to see. 6 months after the trial, I threw another birthday party. This time, I wore a simple black dress that cost $50 and invited only people who genuinely cared about me. David gave a toast about second chances and hard-won wisdom. Nobody spilled wine on me, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building a better life than the people who tried to tear you down ever imagined possible. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. Music.